As you can see, obviously, broadcast and PR and the coronavirus, obviously in less than a month, the broadcast PR world, much like the rest of the world, has obviously been turned absolutely on its head. And to many people who sort of take in the news, whether that's TV, radio, or online, what seems like blanket coverage at the minute about COVID-19, there are actually still opportunities out there for clients, for your clients, for our clients on radio, TV, and online as well. So what we're going to do today, we're going to look at the sort of stories and guests that appeal most to broadcasters in the current climate, and kind of explain to you, if you don't know yet, kind of exactly how these interviews are being facilitated, and why you kind of really should be considering broadcast PR right now as well. So I didn't introduce myself at the start. I'm Arthur, work on the media relations team at Shout Communications, and obviously I'm working at my home currently in West London. I hope everyone else is also at home and able to work pretty well under the current circumstances. So really looking at the current situation, as with any kind of big ongoing story, of course, coronavirus coverage does make it kind of very challenging place for other stories to get on air at the minute. So as you'll be seeing, if you watch to or listen to any kind of news on TV, radio, read online, everything right now is dominated by the coronavirus. And any story that makes it on currently in this sort of past few weeks, and for the next kind of couple of weeks too, it's going to have to some way relate to coronavirus. So if you're putting someone forward to speak as a guest, they've got to in some way link to the story and add some sort of value to the debate as well. At the moment, there isn't really a huge point pitching anyone in who doesn't hugely relate to this, because broadcasters won't react to that, and we've had a bit of experience of that in the last couple of weeks ourselves. But although that's probably kind of not what you people want to hear as PRs, or want to hear in general, our mood over the last few weeks has actually been positive, as it's kind of helped us take a step back from the day-to-day kind of workings of what we do, and actually look at our clients from kind of a different angle and think, how can we help them in a kind of creative way? So it's been interesting to kind of look at existing clients and help them in different ways, which we possibly haven't been able to kind of help them before. It's a different way of working for everyone. Obviously, it's very strange. Obviously, at the start, it was a shock, and it comes with various different challenges. But after a few weeks, I feel, from my point of view, and maybe yours as well, that things have started to calm down somewhat. And certainly from our perspective, we're now seeing clients start to put the wheels in motion for possible campaigns. Some are further down the line than others, but others can be in the next couple of weeks and stuff. But the kind of the mood is starting to feel a little bit more positive as well. Links us into kind of story fatigue. So story fatigue is very much inevitable, and there's already on some stations an appetite for other news, in contrast to the kind of ongoing big story as well. So we are starting to find that much more kind of other content is actually starting to seep through. We're only kind of 4 or 5 weeks or so into it, and those gaps are already appearing. So that's kind of a positive for us. I feel at the minute there's definitely right now a feeling that more good news stories are needed. You're starting to see more kind of quirky, funny stories that link back to it. Heartwarming stories as well. Obviously, we see the story of the 99-year-old man, Tom, walking around his garden, raising, when I last checked, about 13 million pounds. So those kind of stories are huge at the minute, because people are looking for those kind of real good, heartwarming, feel-good stories. Also great community spirit stories as well, starting to find their way on. Particular focus in the last week or two has been on kind of health, physical activities, well-being stories. People staying fit at home is a big one. I think the conversation is going to move on in the next couple of weeks to kind of mental health stories. Obviously, people being cooped up inside for a long time. We've seen the success of Joe Wicks's PE lessons, especially with kids sort of being homeschooled. There's been a big popularity in that, kind of how parents can keep creatively engage with their kids, how they can do things with them that they may not normally do, kind of healthy eating, cooking stuff as well. So the conversation is definitely shifting, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that as we become, further and further detached from socializing society and normality. Just looking at that, Katrina, are you still receiving an error message? or you're managing to get through. Zoe has asked a question. Although almost impossible to predict, in your experience, how long do you think this coverage would dominate the news cycle? Good question, well timed. As you see the first bit of this slide here. So we like to think of it sort of a bit like Brexit. Obviously, given kind of recent developments, coronavirus is going to be kind of in every news bulletin for what feels like the absolute foreseeable. With lives at risk, of course, it kind of overshadows a story even like Brexit. We make the comparison, obviously, because we sort of feel it's like a similar timescale. We're going to see news agenda predominantly dictated by coronavirus. The amount of airtime it gets will obviously lessen and lessen, and it will eventually drop further and further down the running order. But a bit like Brexit, we should expect it to kind of rumble on for even as long, after it's cleared up, as various kind of inquiries and investigations go on, and the effects of it are kind of felt, through the economic side of things as well. So it's going to be there or thereabouts in news bulletins for a couple of years, but ultimately, how much coverage it gets will drop further and further down the agenda. And even at this period in time, we are still finding great success on broadcast media. And I'll go through various ways that we're doing that. But obviously, very much expect it to still be a story that goes on for a while, and much like Brexit, kind of develops new strands and kind of different arguments to it as well. Just checking, there's one person there, Claire. Have we started? Can other people hear me and see me as well? Claire's just saying, have we started? Cool, thanks. I'm hoping that it's not a problem for... Okay, cool, thank you. Hoping it's not a problem for everyone. Thanks very much, guys. Cheers. Claire, I think you have to click on something to make it start. Cool, right, we'll crack on. If Claire can get it started, that'd be great. So we'll now cover the sort of effects on coverage that we're seeing as a result of this. So we've kind of had it from word down on high at the BBC, for example, that they are instructing regional stations to find more local corona-related feel-good stories very much in their patch. So be good for kind of community initiatives, grassroots charities or local businesses as such. So it's very much worth drilling down in your client list to see if you've got any kind of brands that fit the bill. We found that there's definitely an appetite for those kind of stories, and that's getting bigger and bigger. Obviously, that's at regional level, and we're finding great success there. On a national level, obviously, you'd expect it very much to be dominated by the coronavirus. So I think nationally, you've got to kind of take that hit, but we are still finding we're getting a lot of success there as well. For example, Thursday and Friday last week, we also ran radio days. We were able to secure 14 interviews and 16 interviews for those particular campaigns. And with various retaining clients, we are finding now that we're managing to place them much more on national broadcast, just as long as they can comment on the coronavirus and be prepared for it as well. So just goes to show that very much possible to still run kind of radio days and campaigns as normal, regardless of the situation. A couple of weeks ago, I'll touch on this at the end as well. We ran a campaign. The story went out the morning after Boris Johnson put the country on a lockdown, and we still were able to get about 13 or 14 interviews there, obviously at a time where you'd expect all the talk to be around the lockdown. And so there are still places and ways that we can do this as well. We're finding that we are getting, potentially less coverage than we would normally, but those kind of campaigns that we have been working on, we're actually finding in the last couple of things we've been doing, more and more is coming in. So I feel that the tide has slightly turned in the coverage sense, and broadcasters now are kind of scrapping around to try and get as much content as they can. So you need to kind of think of it a little bit like Christmas figures as well. So we are finding that even if we are getting less coverage, you need to look at the figures. So because everyone is at home, very much like they would be during the holidays or at Christmas, even if you're getting less hits, the actual total reach and the overall number of people that you're reaching is actually probably higher, because you're getting a lot of people that are watching news, a lot of people that are taking in content that they wouldn't normally necessarily be getting. So what does kind of lockdown, what does it look like for broadcast PR? So life's sort of going on as normal, but not really as we know it. So producers of news and daytime programs have already made moves, obviously, to stop contributors coming into their studios. Presenters obviously most radio presenters now are kind of hosting their shows from the confinements of their own home, and you're getting only a couple of TV presenters that are kind of going into studios still, and often is the case now that you're finding one presenter maybe in the studio and then another presenter maybe kind of linking up with them on Skype. I know that Channel 4 News do that particularly. And this is obviously becoming increasingly more prominent, and we are just needing to adapt to this as the norm, and it's an adaptation that's happened really, really fast, and we've had to kind of move with the times as well. So not today or tomorrow, but obviously, not in the next month or so. But we are finding that more and more gaps are appearing in national radio and television news schedules. People, broadcasters and journalists, they need to keep their audience interested, engaged, and the media are going to need more to do that than just coronavirus coverage coming up as well. Of course, people want to know about the latest developments concerning coronavirus, but people are still needing a sort of a bit of normality in their lives as well. So we are trying to help as much as we can. So fitness and mental health, obviously things that are appearing a lot more, inspirational things as well going down a tree at the minute. There's also an appetite for kind of professional service stories. So think kind of lawyers, bankers, retailers, bike manufacturers, just go through the list of companies and services that are actually still allowed to remain open at this time, see if that's relevant to your client base, how they can comment on it, even if it's just a case study really of how they're coping with the coronavirus crisis, what they're doing to staff, how they're coping, with everything on pause. Anything you can kind of think of objectively to try and help your clients at this stage is obviously going to add a lot of value to them. So the big thing for us is obviously technology at the minute is absolutely the answer. So Skype for TV and phone interviews for radio are now completely acceptable forms of interview. There are many different ways that you can kind of conduct phone interviews other than actually just on the phone these days. So broadcasters particularly, the main thing that they're looking for at the minute is obviously content, first of all, and guests. They do prefer quality sound or HD vision, but more importantly, they need a wide variety of contributors. And at the minute, there's, this is kind of the compromise that people have had to find between the two. Obviously, all of us now must be used to kind of dodgy internet connections, kind of crackly interviews. We see it a lot, even in the coronavirus kind of briefings at the end of every day. Journalists can't seem to get themselves in good quality audio themselves. So it's kind of accepted. And whilst it's not perfect, before it may have been seen as a kind of embarrassing interview, tech glitch, or kind of PR disaster for your client. Actually now, just as long as you can get your spokesperson in that slot, then they've got much more of a chance of making it on. If anyone does have any questions, just pop them in the box as well. So in terms of radio days for us, the main standout point is that our radio days are still going ahead as normal. I want to very much stress that to people. We are still conducting radio days for our clients on a regular basis, and we're experiencing some really, really good results, especially over the last couple of weeks and into next week now as well, even in these kind of testing times. So ordinarily, the kind of back-to-back interviews that make up our radio days, conducted from our studio in Bloomsbury in central London. We're currently not living ordinary lives though, so even as even tonight, a lockdown extension kind of looms over us. Again, we've kind of had to adapt, as have broadcasters too. And so we're kind of adapted to this new way of working, whilst also trying to keep things almost as normal. So what does the kind of remote radio day look like, really? Stated, obviously, we're still going ahead with our radio days, and we've been doing quite a lot, especially in the last couple of weeks. And we also did a few in the kind of very early stages of the lockdown too. That was obviously a much more challenging time back then, and people were still finding their feet on how they were going to do stuff as well. But we've adapted, broadcast have adapted, and it's becoming kind of increasingly less challenging as the weeks go on to kind of place stories. So with remote radio days, there's absolutely no need for anyone to go anywhere. Remote radio day involves spokesperson doing very much in the interviews from their home. So ideally either through Skype, FaceTime, or landline, as the sound quality, over landline is much better than it is over a mobile. Some broadcasters obviously will still do the interviews over mobile phones potentially, but it's obviously best to try and source better audio if at all possible. If it's pre-recorded, there's various different ways that you can record audio locally and send it to stations sort of in good quality audio. So one particularly easy way of doing this is through audio or voice notes on a smartphone. You can also do it on kind of a laptop or any device, a smart device that you're using as well. Really simple to record, and then once you've finished, you can simply email the audio file to the presenter or the station. Broadcasters, obviously adapting various ways in which they've done it, and they're still kind of changing things around as well. Various different stations are doing different things, but we're obviously here to help with the logistics of that as well. The end goal obviously being to try and produce decent output, even, try and make it look as seamless as possible, even in these challenging times. So broadcasters are being much more flexible than ever we've found, which has been very welcome for us. And kind of anything we can do or you can do to help them at this stage is greatly appreciated. So again, our advice really is to kind of crack on with campaigns now, and obviously, in the near future, as we're seeing really good appetite currently for our assistance from broadcasters. Anything we can do to help them at the minute is really adding, I feel at this stage, much more value, than we ever really have done before. So what we do at Shout, we still produce the radio day, but obviously remotely from our producers' homes, that either myself or one of my colleagues. This is something we've actually done many times before, but obviously a different reason being normally when a client wants to do the interviews to take place from a different place other than our London studio. So if they are kind of based in a different city or the spokesperson can't make it to us. So it's actually something that we are accustomed to doing. Kind of ways in which we do this, so we'll allow a bit more time between the interviews, just in case, as it kind of takes much longer to make a phone call to the spokesperson than just to speak directly through the green room to the sound booth. We'll be in touch with the spokesperson and the stations as normal, and our producer will be calling ahead to the stations to kind of check the logistics and aim to basically provide exactly the same service, even though the radio day will be happening remotely. As I say, it's kind of a tried and tested thing. We've done many times now with great success. So I wouldn't worry about those kind of things. People are obviously worried because it's different way of doing things, but actually we're finding some really good success doing it this way. So we'll obviously still be keeping an eye on things remotely. You'll have the schedule so that you know which interviews are live, and you'll be able to listen to find each station online ahead of the interview, or listen to them as they're broadcast as well. Another way you can do this is actually if you're a spokesperson speaking to the broadcaster on a landline, you can probably have them on a mobile phone call and you can be listening kind of that way as well. We obviously will still provide a copy of all the audio for any live or pre-recorded interviews, very much, if we can, where possible as normal. We're still producing final reports, wrap-up reports and coverage clippings as well. So you'll get all of that at the end of a campaign, very much like you normally would too. Just have a look at a couple of questions. Kylie Borden, what type of content have you been putting out in recent radio days? We'll touch on a couple, Kylie, at the end, and if there's any kind of specific clients that you have that you want to ask about, then that's fine at the end as well. Yeah, same to your other question. We'll touch on that slightly at the end. Thank you. So looking at television, then TV PR opportunities. So for TV, Skype is very much the way forward. Spokespeople should be kind of prepared for doing Skype interviews remotely by now, really. Skype interviews becoming much more commonplace, even before coronavirus. Broadcasters were using them for convenience anyway, and cost-cutting measures. So very much like a down-the-line interview, you need to remember to kind of look directly at the camera, or laptop or PC camera, and consider kind of what's behind you. Try and ensure there's no background noise, and kind of any distractions as well, to the best of your ability. If your internet connection's weak, but your story's strong, you still could do a kind of phone interview. We've seen it happen quite a few times on stuff like GMB, where it's not ordinarily acceptable, but if broadcasters badly want to cover the story, they may take it. And for that kind of scenario, it's good to have a still of your spokesperson as a placeholder, so they know who they're speaking to, ready to send when they're doing that. Have a look on our website. We've got some blogs and stuff about resources, how we're doing it. We also kind of offer media training as a service. Normally one of the things we do, but we've also, before coronavirus, actually had a bit of experience in doing Skype media training. We've done this with clients in the US, and something that we're seeing to do a lot more of as well. And we're getting a lot of quotes for this and a lot of demand for this as well. So if you've got any kind of comments or quotes about potential Skype media training for your clients, then get in touch with me or one of the team, because obviously we're finding it's really useful at the minute. And yeah, quickly, the kind of things to remember then for a Skype interview. So check the background is suitable. It's okay, obviously, at this period to be appearing that you're working from home, but you don't want anything kind of political, or that could potentially, damage your company's reputation in the background behind people. So if you're doing a broadcast interview, raise the laptop, so looking straight into the laptop's camera, obviously trying to have it at a flat level to avoid potentially this kind of shot that you're seeing now. And it's a bit more flattering for people as well if it's kind of on that level. And try and obviously minimize any background noise or interruptions, as tricky as that can actually may be in this current time. So post-coronavirus, obviously, still looking like a way away, but that time will come. And once the crisis is over and kind of brands and businesses that have all suspended their campaigns, they'll all be trying to go at once. So we're kind of wary at the minute that there's going to be a huge rush at the end of this for everyone to try and get out their campaigns. So our advice is obviously to try and keep it smooth during this time, keep going with stuff that you potentially have planned for now, because at the end of this, there's going to be big competition and a big rush for everyone, more so than we've ever seen. So these are challenging times, but we do obviously think that there's going to be a bit more appetite, further down the line, as we say. And it's worth, still going with your campaigns at the minute, because if you're thinking that, then your client, other clients or your competitors might also be thinking potentially not to go as well. So there's gaps in the market for you and your clients at this current time. What is happening at Shout at the minute? So all of our team obviously working remotely for the duration of this lockdown. Offices, studios closed, but we're very much fully equipped to deal with this and can run basically all of our normal services as usual remotely. Obviously, the most straightforward thing we can do is media relations, so radio, TV, and video placement online and stuff as well. Obviously, as I touched on there, we can do media training from remotely. Obviously, other stuff such as video production, we're seeing a tiny bit of that. There's ways and means you can go around that as well. So we are kind of pretty much running as normal. Obviously, our normal talks and courses that we do, we're now running as kind of webinars. So this, and we've got some others coming up soon as well. So if you want any more information about them or other things that we can help you with, then get in touch with Faye, who you'd have booked in with this, or any other members of the team as well. Created a sort of slide about broadcast PR and coronavirus, how we're kind of doing remote radio days from our point of view, and I can forward that all to you as well. So just touch on then some recent campaigns that we have done for clients that we've found have been challenging or have gone really well, just to give you a kind of flavour of some of the stuff that we may have been working on. So this particular campaign, is a case study for Ordnance Survey. So the map company, the people that make the maps, we've supported them for a good couple of years now for various different projects. And this particular one, we've actually supported them with over the last couple of years. It's a yearly project that they do called National Get Outside Day, which obviously originally is a story about getting people outdoors. They run this annual campaign on a day to try and get almost 1 million people outdoors involved in something that they like, so that they might not typically do. And it's a really good campaign for sort of families, kids, and people, people who live in urban areas as well, who may not actually know of any good ideas of what they can do. So it's had great success in the past, and it's a really good campaign. This year, obviously, with social distancing measures and obviously instructions from government to us to stay at home, we had to adapt this campaign, and so decided to change it from Get Outside Day to Get Inside Day. So obviously it seems a little bit cheesy, but ultimately this story was one that really hit home and worked really well. It was it's a sort of perfect story for the time. I think happened back in the last week. So why it was so good, really, it linked into the coronavirus pandemic, but there was kind of enough separation from it to have a sort of light-hearted feel. The aim of the particular campaign was to kind of call on people to stay indoors to protect others, and encouraging them to get active and stay at home as well. Hit the right note in terms of covering enough of coronavirus, and also kind of being health related, but feel good enough as well. And we also had a really good guest. You see at the bottom there, Ewan Thomas, the former kind of GB sprinter and MBE. So the coverage on this was really, absolutely phenomenal. Even more so given the fact that Boris Johnson was still in hospital at this time in intensive care. There's a lot of coverage about that on the day of the story as well. And the challenge is really being that producing a multimedia broadcast campaign remotely is a challenge. There's a lot of people to kind of liaise with, and everything seems to run not quite as quick at home as it would do in the office. So everyone involved in this campaign worked from home. Our two spokespeople speaking to journalists via Skype, phone, other ways as well, supported by our producer, who called ahead to the stations to confirm each of them, briefing the spokespeople via calls, texts and emails as well. Obviously, Ewan Thomas, for something like this, really good spokesperson. It's not sort of top tier celebrity, but really good spokesperson for this. Covers a lot of sporty side, but also he's appeared on Strictly and certain things like that as well. So he kind of ticks the regional BBC agenda as well. And he had so many interviews actually towards the end that we needed to bring in a second spokesperson from Ordnance Survey 2. And the project ended up going over a couple of days rather than just the original one. So this is a real success story. It's, a real good mix of radio and TV, and just goes to kind of highlight what can be achieved in these circumstances. Very little strain for the spokespeople. They're just from their homes as well. So secured 32 interviews for this, with reaching nearly 59 million listeners and viewers. Included 3 TVs, 6 national radio interviews, and 15 regional BBC interviews, which is absolutely amazing in these times. We've also got various kind of case studies, videos, and audio compilations of this up on our website. Feel free to have a look there, or email again one of the team, and we can get stuff sent through to you. Does anyone have any questions? I'll just touch on another campaign that we've done recently. This happened slightly earlier on in the process. So we, on the 24th of March, supported our client, James Reed PR, and their client, the Asphalt Industry Alliance, with the sort of annual campaign that they do. It's a State of the Nation's Roads report called the Alarm Survey. So we've supported them in this campaign now for around 5 years. It's become a bit of a kind of set piece event for broadcasters, really. And whilst on the surface of it, it may seem a very kind of dry and dull topic, it's actually one of those campaigns that really flies, because if you think about it, roads very much affect everyone, and broadcasters just seem to love it. And just kind of think how many times you've seen stories about the state of the nation's road, or particularly pothole stories on TV. It's kind of everywhere, and broadcasters really do like it. This campaign, obviously, so we've supported them for a number of years on it. And we've had some really great success over the years. Obviously, without doubt, this year, absolutely the most challenging. Mainly because there was no link to the pandemic here. it was, purely about roads, and it was a slight questioning of the government. It was off the back of the budget, quite questioning of the government's funding of the nation's roads at a time where it kind of felt potentially on the back burner. So that was a challenge. We also have the challenge that we have to find a kind of new angle for this every year, having kind of achieved extensive coverage for this campaign in previous years, constantly having to evolve the story rather than just kind of saying that the nation's roads are bad and underfunded, or there's X amount of potholes every year. So those are particular challenges. Obviously, this was even actually complicated then much further by, this was the Tuesday after the Monday night before, where we were placed on lockdown. All key workers and everyone staying at home under the regulations. So the morning after that seemed particularly like quite a silly time to go, but it actually still went quite all right. So both spokespeople and our producers worked from their homes again. Spokespeople were given a list of the interviews and what to expect. Where possible, we got the broadcasters to call them as well, obviously meaning no travel for them either. Our producer again called ahead at each interview. We advised the spokespeople as we would always. So this particular one just goes to highlight that even probably on what was the worst day ever really to go out with a campaign, it still went ahead and achieved good results. So it kind of highlights that it really is possible to go ahead with stuff at the minute if you're having doubts or your clients are kind of umming and ahhing at the minute about going ahead. For this, we secured 13 radio interviews, and the campaign was also mentioned twice on the Today programme, and the report also picked up on there as well, with a total reach of nearly 15 million listeners. So yeah, as well as kind of various campaigns and projects that we're working on at this time in particular, we're still supporting our retained clients as well through this period. We're finding some really good success for them as well. I will just touch on them. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the box as well. One of our clients is a personal trainer and influencer called Feel Good with Lavina, a lady called Lavina Mehta. She's a personal trainer who specializes in kind of exercise snacking, so short bursts of exercise. Ordinarily, she'd be working with our clients on a one-to-one basis in the gym. Obviously, social distancing measures mean that people like her have now had to adapt and morph as well into kind of more online classes and teaching methods like that as well. So we've been placing her a lot recently, talking about how families can exercise together at home during lockdown. It's been really good to link current lockdown with positive stories and health and well-being stories as well. So that's a real success, and we're finding a lot of that is actually making quite good coverage. Between kind of 15th and the end of March, we were able to secure her about 9 or 10 opportunities on stations like LBC, BBC Radio London, and British Forces Radio as well. So she's getting some good success, and it just goes to kind of highlight current wellness is a really strong topic at the minute. We think it's going to kind of morph a bit more into mental health issues, but ultimately any health stories at the minute are doing really well. We're supporting a number of health clients at the minute during this period as well. Big appetite for it. And so any kind of health related brands or clients that you have during this period, I'd definitely say have a look and see what they can do. We also support a client of ours called MLEX, who are a global newswire, particularly busy at this period of time because their team of experts, journalists, are sort of covering every twist and turn of coronavirus in UK, Europe, and also America as well. So we've been placing them on broadcast opportunities regularly. We also support a number of financial services clients, insurance brands, reputation experts, and kind of tech companies as well too. We've had great success for all of those over the last period, but the only thing you obviously need to make sure of is that they can speak about coronavirus and be prepared to speak about it and how it's impacting their business and their workers, obviously, of course, and how they can add a bit of value to the debate. So I'll flick you into any questions. Obviously, we're not saying at the minute, it's easy, but it is very possible to get coverage on national and regional radio and television as well. You just need to be aware of the things that are needed of you and how you're going to achieve it. And obviously stories that broadcasters most like particularly looking at, those feel-good stories now. And obviously you need to be linking back to the pandemic in some way. And as we touched on, there will be, over the next coming weeks, more and more opportunity for people to kind of find holes in the news agenda where they can go out with stories that aren't particularly pandemic related, but for the time being, it is sort of still linking back to that as well. So please fire in any questions that you have. If you want any more information as well, kind of broadcast campaigns that we could help you with, get in touch with any of us via email, or just call one of us as well. And we'll obviously send you all of these slides. Kylie has asked a question. What are your thoughts about travel brands and destinations at the moment? Do you think there are any opportunities for those at this time? Really good question. Obviously, it's probably the sector that are finding it the toughest at the minute. I think my advice for the time being would be that whilst we're in kind of a travel lockdown and an international travel ban, I think it's probably not the wisest time to go out with travel stories. But ultimately, once this is all cooled down a little bit, travel is going to be right at the forefront of everyone's minds. And I think it's probably worth keeping your powder dry as travel companies till that moment, obviously keeping in mind that it's going to be highly competitive and your competitors will be going out with stuff as well. But the timing of that feels right to kind of leave travel stuff to maybe breathe a little bit until further down the line. I hope that helps. Emmy has asked, not that you need to name them, of course, but have you found some clients difficult to get coverage during this time, perhaps due to the sector that they operate in? Not really, no, purely because we've only been helping clients, as I touched on in this, clients who are, able to talk about coronavirus, able to help with the debate, able to add their voice and kind of value to the debate as well. So no, I would say at the minute there's no particular sector where, I just touched on that. I think travel is probably the only sector at the minute who you may struggle to get feel good news stories on at the minute, PR stories. People, the only kind of travel news and stuff that you will see is purely analysis of companies, losses that they're making, furloughs, redundancies, those kind of things. So this is not good news at the minute, but their time will come. But no, I would say there's not any particular clients that we have struggled to place at the minute. No, they just need to be prepared to talk about coronavirus and actually have a strong story. And we're only really offering up people that can do that at this stage. So it's sort of been equal across the board, I'd say. Rebecca has asked, if clients want to talk about their own services in response to coronavirus, how best to approach this without being too self-serving? Good question. I'd say, everyone wants to talk about what they do and what they can contribute, and obviously clients want to talk about their services. So we've had a number of these. Particularly, I did one yesterday about a client who offering up language translation device service, across the global kind of pandemic, trying to help people out in that, and those kind of things. Obviously they're talking about their product, but it's then relating back to coronavirus. So I don't think it is too self-serving. It's obviously every man for himself at the minute. So I think if your client can really help with the debate, if they've got something that they are, their service can help, or any ways in which the company is helping, there's always an appetite to hear from new voices, a wide variety of contributors. So I don't think it is too self-serving. You've just got to really avoid in broadcast being too pluggy, and making sure that you have a story and you're not just pushing the brand. I'd say is the best advice there. Does that help? Is there any more questions or any follow-ups to those? I'll stay on for a few minutes as well. No worries. Thank you for joining. And yeah, obviously feel free to have a look on the website. and email anyone or call anyone from the team. We're all sort of working very much normal hours, and happy to help in any kind of way we can. Gemma has asked, what type of shows are the best to be pitching right now? Rolling news is 24/7 coronavirus, so it's more feature-based shows where you're getting more hits. Yeah, really good question as well. At the minute, obviously, the national news agenda is very much dominated by the news, and the news at the minute is coronavirus. And they are, they've got their own reporters, they've got their own ways in which they're covering things. But it doesn't necessarily mean we're ruling out kind of, placing clients on the news. I would probably say, it's a stretch to get someone on ITV, ITV News or 10 o'clock news. At the minute, it's probably a bit of a stretch because there's a lot of guests out there. There'd have to be a really strong guest, but we're getting a load of success on other kind of news outlets as well. As you say, you've mentioned rolling news there. We think about kind of LBC, they've got rolling news. If you think about stuff like that, they are always looking for guests on those kind of channels, because they are taking up, so much time. So maybe, BBC News Channel, other ones as well, Sky News. So going away from the your kind of standard lunchtime news where slots are smaller and obviously the competition is really high as well. But we are actually seeing quite a lot of success on national outlets at the minute, purely because the way in which broadcasters are doing their interviews at the minute, they're not so constricted and restricted by time, because people can do interviews from wherever now, at home, through the night, and we're finding that actually it's opened up quite a lot of doors in terms of, we're getting on certain shows we never normally would, because a spokesperson can do a certain time, or the presenter can do a certain time, that actually puts them in a different, different space from where they would normally be going on. So I'd say at the minute, anything's possible. We're actually kind of thinking outside the box a little bit, thinking much more weekend shows, evening shows, things that we wouldn't typically do in the PR world, purely because, in the evening news or lunchtime news is normally dictated by the morning's news agenda. Because at the minute, it's a bit of a free-for-all any time of day, and people are looking for content. So I'd say at the minute, if you've got a good story, good spokesperson, just pitch it out there. Make sure as well, we are, we've obviously got our database and people that we send stuff out to. I'd say I found it a bit easier recently pitching stuff out, because ultimately it's quite hard during normal life to get hold of the right person. Because you get passed around and, newsrooms are busy and things get lost. At the minute, it's really easy to get hold of the right person, because, there's less people on the phones, there's less people manning certain news desks and stuff. It's really easy at this time with one phone call to get your press release in front of the right person. And they've got, they've still got loads of stuff to go through. But ultimately, we are getting the right things in front of the right people. And I was going to say the right time, but there isn't really a right time at the minute, because people are kind of on the clock much more than they would be from a broadcast point of view. So I'd say just go ahead with it, really, and we're finding successes that we wouldn't normally see. Is there anything else? Kept pretty much to time. If there's any other questions, please feel free to send them through. Otherwise, enjoy your Thursday evenings. Stay on for another minute. Anyone else? Right. No worries. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining. I'm going to stop it now. And please feel free to send through any other questions that you may have. But have a nice evening. Thank you.